Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 cards that would not make the cut in a championship deck. Tonight, I'm your host, Phil, and joining me tonight, we've got three of our co-hosts. We've got Skylar, how you doing?
Doing pretty great.
Josh?
Hi there, doing well.
And Brian?
What's up, Doing good.
Yeah. So tonight, we are beginning the long road to Adepticon. We are going to be talking as our main topic about what we're doing to prep this year, and sort of what our thought process is and how we're going about it. I guess I should say a quick bit of context before we move forward. We are recording on January 17th. We have officially heard that the Adepticon Grand Clash will be the Nemesis format this year, hence the topic. And we are just a few days out from our own mini tournament that we're going to be hosting here in Madison, Wisconsin at Noble Knight Games on the 21st. So if you're in the area, come and join us. This episode, I believe, will be dropping on the day of the tournament, so you could even listen to it on your way over. But let's get into some community shout-outs after I sort of tooted our own horn there. You guys have anything you'd like to shout out? Anything that you've seen in the community lately?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So Mandarga has recently, Mandarga on Discord, very often frequents the Vassal Discord is where I see him. Also has a blog, the Underdogs blog. And he has gone ahead and created a comprehensive format article that's extremely beginner friendly. So if you ever need to, or want to point somebody towards how to get started, this is an excellent resource to do so. So we're going to go ahead and link that. Give it a look.
Awesome. Yeah, always good to have those kinds of resources. We used to have Well of Power, it's just sort of a compilation blog, and now having somebody else to sort of put stuff up to be like, hey, here's your beginner sort of resources, and have stuff to help people know what the different format types are, and especially now when we've got a few more and they're not as clearly laid out. That's pretty nice. Josh, Brian, anything you guys have seen?
Yeah, I'll shout out Agents at Sigmar. They are a YouTube channel that's been around for a while, and I just noticed a flood of new videos that they've posted, covering Grid and Cracks, Loon Core, Fearsome Fortress, Rivals, Nemesis, and some Nemesis bat reps. So if you want to prefer the video bat reps, you can give them a check. And it has Chosen Axes versus the Eyes of Nine and Nemesis.
Very nice. Classic. Yeah, those guys have been around doing videos for a really long time, all the way back to the Shadespire days. I think they do a really nice job. So, not always as present in some of the Discord communities or anything like that, but they've been sort of a consistent bat rep voice out in the community for a long time. So yeah, go check them out. They do some fun stuff. And their matchups are not always like meta or anything, like Brian just mentioned. So you can see some fun stuff. Josh, anything that you'd like to call out?
Yeah, I just wanted to shout out a correction from the last episode. We reported on Sleek's Bowl and his tournament going on out there. That will be on February 19th, not the February 12th that was previously reported. Again, that's at Gordon's Good Games in the Tuscadero. That's between Los Angeles and San Francisco. It'll be at 1 p.m. Rivals format. Lots of prizes. They've already got looks like 12 people signed up, so got plenty of people there looking to have a good time, play some Rivals format, learn the game, and so yeah, if you're in the area, give it a go.
Sweet. Yeah, also really great to be able to get 12 people for Rivals.
No kidding.
That's pretty nice, because I feel like usually Rivals is more, you're just bringing in brand new people. I don't know how many veterans he's got helping to bring new folks on, but that is certainly good to hear.
He's definitely trying to make it newcomer friendly, so I think
Oh
that's
yeah, for sure, and really appreciate that, Sleeks Bowl. I'm sure you're going to be listening here at some point, so appreciate the enthusiasm to build the community. That is something that we have always strived for, and love to see it out in other areas.
One quick event that came in just under the wire, we wanted to let you know about a event at the Portal in Manchester, Connecticut. It'll be a best of 3 Nemesis format starting at noon, $10 entry fee, and it'll be on February the 5th. Again, that's Portal Games in Manchester, Connecticut. Go check it out. If you want to know more, you can find Chris Spark on one of the Discords.
But yeah, so I think that's community shoutouts. I have been busy with a number of different things, so I have not actually stayed in the loop too much. I've sort of popped in just to see, like, hey, somebody posted something, but like I don't really know what those things are.
Yeah, we did get a lot of really good feedback on our debate episode, so we got a lot of
Yeah.
that we want to roll into our next debate and improve upon. Take a lot of good suggestions.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, the total amount of feedback was absolutely great. It's a new format for us, something that we're trying different, and we definitely want to do more of it. But if there's things you think we could be doing better, or things that you thought were good that you want us to know about, please let us know. We've already heard from a number of folks, and yeah, it's just really great to have that kind of feedback, so we can try and make it everything as best as it can possibly be for future episodes. So that brings us to our hobby section. And with going to Adepticon in just a couple short months, I'm sure everybody's got a little bit of hobby that they've been working on. Who would like to shout anything out? Anything you've been working on lately? I know, Josh, you've been starting on something.
Yeah, Josh is chomping at the bit.
Absolutely would love to share. So I caught the painting bug bad recently. So started off with a concept. So yeah, I've really been chomping at the bit. I caught the hobby bug pretty bad, and I've been painting the Gore Chosen. So started off as just a quick concept, and that was, trying to wound an entire realm is some pretty big kid moves there. Be a real shame if that realm were to do something to the contrary. So I've been painting them up with that concept in mind, and I'm real excited to enter that into our painting competition on Saturday.
Yeah, they're looking super tight.
Well, you'll have to share pictures somewhere, because that sounds very interesting, and I'm sure people will be curious to know what that actually means.
By the time this episode airs, I will have pics ready and waiting, or I'll be dead. So one of the
two. One way or another, you'll know what happened.
Yep.
Well, he's already got the Gore Hulk like 80% done, 90% done, and it's looking fire.
Yeah, I'm very excited to share them out, so I'll have pictures ready and waiting by the time the listeners get their ears on this.
Fire, what are you gonna do with Herax and all his fire?
Ooh, wouldn't you like to know?
Yes.
See, the strategy there is, if I don't know what I'm doing, you don't know what I'm doing. So misdirection.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Brian, have you been painting anything?
I have not. I'm still kind of waffling on what I'm going to be taking to Adepticon, because that's going to be what I focus on. I had the hobby progress on the Loon Court, and I can't say that my spirit's in it for getting them to completion for Adepticon. I'm going to take something else for my warband, and so I'm still waffling on what that will be. So,
hey, that is part of the process, and that is hobby too.
Yeah.
Any models you'd have to build, or do you have everything built already?
I have everything built, but I'm like, there's a part of me that's hesitant because I want to wait and see what this new warband is, because if they're spicy, that might just give me the hobby bug and get me to paint something over in the course of a week, like Josh. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Skylar, you got anything?
Yeah, just been enjoying running the local league. We were 2 weeks into that at this point in time, and we already have so many warbands that have shown up, and everybody, like the attendance has just been blowing me away. I'm super excited every time I get there. I am not the first one there anymore. Like there's always somebody waiting or somebody already playing a game, and it's just really great to see the excitement and the momentum behind the local league. And with Nemesis announced for Adepticon, there's a lot of folks that are, very Nemesis minded right now. I was hanging out with some friends that are going to join us at Adepticon this year that were asking me to help them out with their decks. So spent some time at some friends' houses, just doing some good old deck building on like war bands that I don't normally play around with myself, just because you kind of lean into your favorites. So I won't spoil their picks for them. I'll let them present them at Adepticon. But I'm having a lot of fun. I've been messing around with Mad Mob and Skace Wild Hunt, and I feel like we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
current count on the leaderboard is 13 participants in our league, so it's awesome to see.
Yeah, always good. And we've had a couple of our fine folk who've not even been able to get out a whole lot yet. So it's definitely good to see that even with the holidays and a longer break, that people are still hanging around, still wanting to jump in there and play some games, and even a couple of new people. So I mean, it's always a little
Yeah.
humbling, and it's also just really great to have so many folks interested in the game and in our small community here.
Yeah, and in this early in the league, there's plenty of time to join in. There's a excellent catch-up mechanic that we have for new players joining in mid league, and so if you're hearing this and you're in the area, feel free to jump on in. If you want to check out our league format, you can check out our episode where we cover all that in depth.
Absolutely.
But you don't need to be learned on the league system to step in and introduce yourself. So if you are in the Madison area, even if you're just like, man, I've heard a little bit about this game, step in. We'd love to show you.
Right. Yeah, I was advertising our league episode for those that would like to have one of their own and start theirs up.
Word.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I think, unless anyone has anything else from Hobby, we can get into our main topic here.
Sounds good.
All right. So the main topic today, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be talking about our path through Adepticon, which we've done in the last couple of years, sort of talking through a little bit about Davey and I's choices and sort of how we reached those choices and what our thought process was. And we're going to basically break that same thing down again, except this time, because it's not championship, we're going to first talk a little bit about what are the things that we're considering now, because it is the Nemesis format, and where does that lead us in different directions about things like what warbands we're expecting to have to face, what warbands do we think make sense to play, and sort of where we're starting to settle. Obviously, as Brian mentioned, he hasn't settled, but still plenty of things that have been considered. So I will have...
Well, if I may cut in just with event details for those that aren't aware or want
sure.
to reaffirm. So Adepticon is the weekend of March. It starts on the Wednesday, so March 22nd to the 26th. It's at Schaumburg, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago, just a short taxi or Uber ride from O'Hare Airport. And it's Chicago, Illinois, central U.S., so it's well within driving distance for most people in the Midwest, such as ourselves.
It's well within driving distance for everybody in the U.S., as
That's
any true Midwesterner knows.
Yeah. So the Underworld's Grand Clash is specifically run on March 25th, which is that Saturday. It begins at 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. It'll have a 2-day cut, so the second day is March 26th, the Sunday, starting at 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Currently for Saturday, they have 72 tickets available. I did get word that they can expand if they reach 72. There's more table space available. They could even double. It is $30 a person to get a ticket at the Grand Clash. There will also be a event pass, and anybody who wants to go to Adepticon, it's free to go and check out the vendor hall, check out all the game space. But if you're going to buy event tickets, there is a $50 event pass, and then you buy the ticket to your event. So just so that everybody knows the costs up front. And that Saturday we will be there in force. You don't have to submit your deck list in advance. You don't even have to commit to a warband in advance, as far as I know, unless that changes. We'll be sure to let you know. Registration does close February 28th at 12 p.m. So we still have about a month for people to decide and figure out if they can or want to go. Again, if you can go but you don't want to be in the event, you're welcome to go and check out Adepticon. I went to Adepticon without participating in any events for 2 or 3 years. Just it's a spectacle and it's awesome to see and walk around and look at everything. So highly recommend.
Yeah, thanks. We can link all that stuff out too, so that folks can have quick access to the registration and everything. But yeah, the Adepticon website, easy to find, easy to navigate. If you need any additional details, they're definitely the place to go check out. Got everything there. Yeah, so I was gonna say, I would like to start things off. Skylar, what are some of the things that you have been considering when starting to think about this Nemesis format for the championship?
Yeah. So with Nemesis, I kind of end up in a different mindset than I do with Championship. With Championship, I think a little bit more about the field I expect to see. I don't actually feel that way with Nemesis. With Nemesis, there's a few warbands that definitely stand out in my mind that I think are really strong right now, and we will likely see quite a bit of at Adepticon this year. But ultimately, I'm not like testing my deck out against like all of these different things that I think I'm going to see to a degree. So what I tend to lean more into as I'm prepping is more the puzzle of my deck and making sure my deck flows as good as possible, and less about what I'm going to be trying to counter or what's my plan when I come up against this. To a degree, it's still there, but it's definitely lessened. And one of the warbands that I expect that we're going to see quite a bit of is the Gnarl Spirit pack, and I'm kind of just putting them out of mind right now. I would love for us to get a some sort of errata or update or far restrictions. Well, I guess that wouldn't apply to Nemesis, but some sort of update to that warband going into Adepticon, because they are taking a ton of events that they show up to. I think they're a little overtuned. I think they're incredibly strong, and I'm kind of just putting them out of mind. Like, I don't want to shape my entire game plan around will I sit across the table from Gnarl Spirit pack. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm starting. Just picking some of my favorite war bands and looking at what sort of pairing I might want to go in with a Rivals plot deck.
And so you say you don't want to play the counter game, and I can understand that, because I think one thing that I've noticed in trying to build decks so far is that you don't have enough options to worry about counters. Like you say, you really have to focus your Nemesis deck on trying to just pick the most optimal choices between the two decks, right? You're so limited in that you only have the cards from one Rivals deck and one faction deck, that you're pretty much just going to say, okay, what are the optimal choices here? What are the optimal choices there? Put them together. If you try worrying about like what are your counter picks, at least what I've been seeing is that it makes it, pretty hard to actually do, like, effectively, if you're trying to do that. I don't know. Any of you guys have any different feelings when you started looking at warbands and what their sort of efficient options are going to be?
It kind of depends because Nemesis is very first and foremost a all or nothing type investment opportunity. So like when you look at when you pick a warband, you got to look at the strength of their warband deck, and then based on that you can kind of determine what rivals decks you can, I at least in my mind, that I can pair with them. If I have a particularly strong warband deck, then I don't need as many to rely on the rivals deck to provide and fill in the cards. But if you have a really weak warband deck, you really need a strong rivals deck. If you have a pretty strong warband deck, then you have more options in my mind. Most of the rivals decks in my mind are geared towards aggro, so it's kind of like if your warband really leans heavily into hold objectives, then you're going towards Daring Delvers and uh, Fearsome Fortress. But depending on the strength of their deck, it depends because you really have to evaluate how important are certain cards, or do you need more cards out of a deck? If I don't know if that made any sense.
Let's just dig into it a little bit more. So you say that you need to have a strong deck. What quantifies a deck, a warband, or a rivals deck as being strong?
I don't necessarily mean that it needs to be strong. For your pick, you could pick a warband like Wormspat and go with a really strong rivals deck that can supplement a lot of their cards. But you have more options the stronger your warband deck is.
So
So I
what
guess,
defines strength?
yeah. What
Uh,
is it then when you're looking at a warband, when you're like, oh, this warband does have a strong deck versus this warband doesn't? What are the criteria? It's like, specifically, what are the cards that are making it look to you as strong or not strong? I think I know what you mean, but let's be clear to the listeners.
Yeah, I can actually jump in here because I think I've got it pretty well laid out for
Yeah.
how I do it. First thing that I look for in a strong warband is their core mechanic. What is it that they want to do? Is it hold objective? Is it deal damage? And then the strength comes from whether or not it's able to pair well with one of the uh, decks that are out there currently. Um, as Brian mentioned, that there is a lot of skew towards aggro in those decks. So if you have a deck, if you have a warband that is more geared towards aggro or a specific type of aggro, whether that be um, Haskell's Rascals, throwing down pings all over the place, just doing little bits of damage, then finding finding a deck and leaning into maybe sudden revelation in the Daring Delvers, being able to control when and where you're doing those kills is is going to be consistently strong. So I think that's kind of what Brian was trying to get into with where the strength lies, is the cohesion between the warband and whichever deck you're picking as your nemesis pick.
yeah, and it's kind of difficult to define because the strength of a warband's deck can mean a lot of different things. Such as you might have a warband that's really variable, like for instance in my experience Dread Pageant can go either full aggro, hold objective, or flex, so they have a lot of flexibility in terms of choosing, do they want to go hard into one, could they do a jack of all trades and do a flex into both, and depending on the rivals deck you pair with, you can lean into that. You also have niche strengths, I would say, such as like Gore Chosen on their face could be just pure aggro. But if you read into their cards more, they have a lot of sit in the center and fight over objectives in no man's land. And that pairs very well with Fearsome Fortress. So, like, you take a decent, like, aggro choice and you could pair that with any of the rivals' decks. But I'd say their real strength comes with pairing that niche strength with the strength of Fearsome Fortress and synergizing those two together to make a really cohesive goal.
So we've got a marriage of cards that match a warband's play style and their sort of mechanic, if you will, and how that then pairs with a rival's deck. And that certainly is something that I would consider to be a strength of a warband in the Nemesis format. Is there any thought given to how efficiently a warband can score their objectives when you're building your Nemesis deck?
Absolutely. So I was going to get into that shortly after giving Brian the assist there. Consistent objectives was my third point, and that is crucial because if you have high scoring, goodness, what's the one that the chosen axes have that's worth like a ton of glory but really really niche? It's the one that Phil and Davey were.
Weren't they both playing Chaos?
Oh, if you're thinking about what we played at our last Nemesis Championship, we were both playing Khorne warbands, and they both have goofy versions of Annihilation where you specifically have to kill your whole opponent's warband and have only one of your fighters surviving.
Gotcha. That is the one I was trying to get at.
Yes, and those are worth, I think...
Khorne's Chosen is a Magore's Fiend card. Score this in an end phase if your leader is the only surviving fighter. 8 glory.
Yeah.
There it is.
All the memes. Yes, obviously that is not something that you want to be playing in a Nemesis tournament unless you're doing silly meme things.
And that's the point I was trying to get at.
Could be a goal to flex on somebody and get that off.
It could be. I think if you were to pull it off, you'd probably pull it off on somebody who couldn't see it coming, and you were probably dunking on somebody you shouldn't be. But, you know, I guess everybody can have their own goals.
Khorne cares not.
But yeah, I think the overall point I was trying to get there was that there are scoring options, but consistency is key. Sure, you're going to come across one or two people that, as Phil said, you can dunk on, but that's not going to win you a tournament.
Yeah. Skylar, you have not had a whole lot to contribute to this. Any other thoughts for what makes a warband quote-unquote strong in the Nemesis format?
He still doesn't have a lot to contribute, so we can move on.
Speaking of dunking on new people.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, I've been Skylar.
Bye, Skylar.
No, as far as strength goes, to contribute to that conversation and to specifically to jump off of the objectives talk, is how many surges can you get off of the rivals deck and a pairing? I think the answer needs to be no less than 5, 6 if you can. And I think you're going to find that the more reliable those surges are, the stronger the deck is going to be over many plays. So I think surges are key. In Nemesis, I don't think you're always going to get 6, and I think that's fine. Me talking like surges being key is new, and the Gnarl Spirit pack being a threat is news to anyone. But I think it should be said, like when you're jumping in, working through your deck, make sure, early on, surges are something you're thinking about, and you can at least get to 5. Maybe that 5th one's a little hard. I think that's okay. But if that 4th one's hard, I think you either need to look at a different pairing or potentially a different warband pick for a tournament like this.
That's a good metric.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point just because it does limit some of the earlier warband choices just because of the nature of how those warbands faction cards were constructed. If you go back to season 1, some warbands only had like 3 or 4 surges. And if you are trying to take those warbands that didn't even have full faction rivals decks to pull from, and then try and have to lean on another deck, you are pretty much, at the complete mercy of that other deck, because you're going to need to carry a lot of the weight from season 1 sort of shortcomings in the faction design with your objectives from that new rivals deck. And I think from what I've seen, that actually makes it pretty hard. So seasons 1 and 2, I'm not saying you can't run those warbands. Definitely try them out if you're feeling something. But I know in my looking at warbands, just to sort of start to build a picture of what I might want to do, I started to realize that your choices got so constricted so fast that it became extremely difficult to build decks for those early warbands. So I almost immediately starting at Beastgrave and looking forward as to what I might want to play. But that also is there's some weird choices in Beastgrave too, where they didn't have the balance of things quite right yet. Hrothgorn is actually a surprisingly difficult warband to build for Nemesis because he doesn't have enough end phase cards. Because he has 8 surges. So just by the nature of things, he just doesn't have as many choices, and one of his choices is an Annihilation clone. So you're already in a pretty bad spot if you're trying to pick your end phases for the Hrothgorn. So some weird things that you normally probably wouldn't have to worry about that are definitely considerations once you're starting to build towards Nemesis.
Man, it is wild to hear difficult to build and Hrothgorn in the same sentence. But in the in the context of Nemesis, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're somebody who's just thinking about this as well, it is definitely something where you might want to just actually sit down with like a few different choices and start just looking at like, what are all my options? You've got your, what is it, 4 or is it 5 rivals decks you can choose from now? It's 4, right?
4 at this time. The 5th one's on its way. Right?
There will be a 5th one. We don't know what
Correct.
it is yet.
Yeah.
We know it's coming in February.
We know it's Beastbound Assault.
Yep, that's the name.
Sounds like Gnarlwood.
Sounds aggro. And I think that's something that we all touched on because we're familiar with it, but let's expand on that a bit. Why is Nemesis leaned aggro? What is it that makes Nemesis aggro right now?
So I think the biggest thing that has it leaning, I think, back it up a little bit, I think there's 2 things. The first is that there isn't as much play in holding objectives, and I think that was a deliberate choice. There were tokens taken off the board. All of the objectives start face up, so we've already curbed the defensive and passive power of the game. Then you put it into a format, Nemesis, where the decks are going to be less consistent. So already there's more value on take all enemies off the board. They can't score anything if they are dead. So I think those 2 things combined make it very rewarding to do the murder and do the murder first.
Which is interesting because, in the past, a lot of the times we've talked about, avoiding rolling dice because the variance of aggro is sometimes its downfall because sometimes you just can't hit. Is there something about Nemesis that's making that to be less of a hindrance?
Well, one thing I would say is that I would also like to point out for those in the past that if you were familiar with the Rivals Plus format, which is what Nemesis became, or Rivals Plus became Nemesis, I guess.
Yeah.
Rivals Plus was Nemesis kind of before it was cool.
Yeah, before GW adopted it. And back then we were having to make do, or we had Silent Menace, Illusory Might. Oh no, there is 5 Nemesis decks. We have 3 right now in the current season: Illusory Might and Deadly Depths. We used to also
Illusory Might is still in, yeah.
Yeah, we used to also include the Essentials pack. But since that wasn't geared for Rivals, it has 60 cards in it, which is a wealth of choices.
That was a bad idea from the start.
Yeah, but one of the things that it means is we don't have any of the hold objectives that are in that deck. So that used to be something that in Rivals Plus, a lot of warbands did use the hold objective tactics from the Essentials pack. Now that's gone and not in the official Nemesis format, so bear that in mind if you're going to Adepticon. Essentials pack is not valid. So with that gone, that is something that has felt lacking. I know that I have felt that missing. I don't necessarily think that's a bad choice because since it had 60 cards, it was the go-to choice for the longest time. But in the current setting with Gnarlwood, you also have the ability to move multiple times to attack after you've made a charge, because you can, if all of your surviving fighters have made a charge, you can still attack. And the current Rivals decks, namely Tooth and Claw, offer a lot of great accuracy bonuses, which make the diciness of aggro a lot more manageable.
Yeah, we've got at least two ways of quote unquote upgrading fighters. One of those is a persisting ploy, but upgrading fighters with +1 dice, which is something we haven't had previously as a option. We've had a lot of plus damage before, but not always with the accuracy. Now we're kind of flipped, where if you need damage, you're probably getting it from your warband instead. But yeah, having those extra dice options certainly makes things easier. Any other thoughts about what is sort of leaning us towards aggro?
Yeah, another thing that really leans into rewarding aggro is any of the hold objectives that are in the game right now are region locked. So you need to hold an objective in enemy territory, or hold an objective within a hex of no man's land. It's not just hold an objective wherever that may be. It's so even if you are going for an objective, you're putting yourself out in the open. It's not just sit back and make you come to me. It's I'm gonna hold on to this objective and pray.
Yeah, for sure. And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say absolutely. And another thing that leans us towards aggro right now is just the emphasis on ping presence, which is a roundabout sort of aggro, right? Because
Absolutely.
yeah, aggro being aggression is where we get that from, and it builds this picture of attack, 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 daka, 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 and but ultimately it's burning bodies down, just taking them off the board left and right as quick as you can. And with ping, you're getting everybody within kill range faster, because if they're vulnerable, a ping can take them out. If you need that kill, you can ping them so that your fighter can come in, get the kill, and you can get that out of attack action, took the fighter out score off.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of incentive, and for ping right now, specifically with sudden demise, offering 2 glory when ping takes, or when a gambit or a lethal, for those unfamiliar, take does the damage that takes an action or a fighter out of action. Got there. So that's a 3 glory kill. So when you're thinking, should I include ping in my deck? I'm running Daring Delvers. I've got sudden revelation or sudden demise here. That's pushing the game that you're about to play more towards rushing health bars down quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is something that was at this. I mean, we're not even that far in yet, but was not something that was quite as obvious when we first got into Gnarlwood. It was like very quickly once we got here, it was like, oh, wait a minute. Suddenly there's all these pings all over the place. We're getting killed by cards. We're getting killed in the power step. That's something that hasn't happened in probably 3 or 4 seasons. I know in Nightvault it was everywhere, but we had magic, so
Yeah, that's fair.
but yeah.
Conversely, I actually, the first time that I read Sudden Demise, I looked at it and went, "Oh no," because
Yeah,
I saw that and was like, "Wait a minute, we're
Right.
gonna have people building into this. What's the viability? Oh no, there's like 4 or 5 out there."
there's a really big carrot, right? It's going to lead people towards
Yep.
the that path. Absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's not even just, hey, there's a warband that can come and smash face. It's like you've got all these different avenues and all these different factors that are leaning the format towards aggro. And so in that vein, I have certainly felt that everything you build has to be at least mindful of the fact that there's going to be a lot of aggro. So you either need to be able to deal with it or be able to ignore it to a certain extent.
Agreed.
So I have certainly started picking out a few warbands and thinking more about, with all of those things in mind, what are the warbands that we expect to see? But I'm curious what you guys have been thinking about in terms of the warbands that we expect to see and where that has been leading you in your decision making.
Well, let's address the elephant in the room.
Yes, obviously.
Godsworn Hunt.
Yeah. Yes.
Just kidding. The
Got
real
me.
Chaos Undivided warband.
Kygra's
The
Rabbit.
Gnarl Spirit Pack. You know, I don't know that I would expect to see them, but they are performing better than I anticipated this season.
But yes, I think to no longer joke and beat around the bush, we are of course talking about the Gnarl Spirit Pack. I mean, I think Skylar let us off quite well with them. They're good.
They're a problem.
They're very strong. They're very fast. I think their speed is probably their best strength. You're gonna see them. Just be prepared for it. I don't know what else to say. I think maybe in some ways, like Skylar was saying, unless you think you can build a warband that specifically is good against them, and I don't know that there's really a warband that is strong into them. You just know they're going to be there, and you just deal with that fact, and maybe you just play what you're going to play because they're going to be a pretty tough out no matter what. I think there are a few options you could take to try and like play counter to them, but that starts to feel, a little bit like you're hoping to get that matchup enough that it's going to be able to carry you through if you start to build counter, and then if you don't face them, you may not actually have the right tools. So it's always a dangerous thing to do, to tool completely towards one warband.
So shall we continue talking about warbands we might see, or should we focus on Gnarl Spirit right now?
No, I think that it's just let's get Gnarl Spirit out. We've cleared the air. We know they're there.
Yep.
We're acknowledging their presence.
Yeah, and they do die. Like
Yeah,
they
can't
are
kill them.
4 wounds, 4 wounds, 3 wound, 3 wound. So kind of build towards your strength if you have a warband with a cleave option right out the gate, you might have an answer for Goral. Otherwise, I would, if you have damage 3 right out the gate, wait for one of their 3 wound fighters to charge you, and then try and take them out. There's ways to kind of like play to your strengths with them. The difficulty with them is they're extremely accurate. They have a lot of benefits and a lot of movement.
I think that if you want a few takeaways regarding Gnarl Spirit Pack is to prepare yourself for when you sit down across from them. Know that their leader has a threat range of 8, because as soon as he activates, he goes to 6 movement and he has a range 2 attack. So 8 away is
range 9 if he wants to ping you.
He has got his spell too.
Oh, sure, indeed. So his threat range is massive. So you're probably not escaping him. And then with the barbarian with the 2 axes. I suppose they're all barbarians.
Kira.
Kira, thank you very much. She can come in with range 5 or a movement 5, and then perform a scything attack on her first turn. So try to be mindful of what scything targets are available to your opponent in case the dice roll off doesn't go your way, because that option's available to them. And then
And fair warning with that scything, it's coming in with 4 dice each attack, grievous. So for 1 damage, spiking to 2.
So and the final threat then is Goral. He can deal 3 damage on his first turn. So those are the 3 like major threats that you need to just be a little mindful of as you're making your placements when you're sitting across from the table.
And I don't know that we necessarily need to do like a full breakdown of each of these war bands of like how to play them. My main point of wanting to mention them was just to say they're going to be there. They're a tough out. Let's clear the air. We don't need to mention them in all of our lists because we know that that's like
Yeah.
problem 1A, and you
Yeah.
can definitely be preparing for them.
No, but they are something that we want to avoid people being blindsided by.
I mean, sure, I don't know that anybody's going to be blindsided by the top tier warband at the moment, but yes, definitely. But to get back to the main point, I think is to just say when you're trying to pick out the warband you want to play, what are the other warbands you're considering? What are the ones you're expecting to see? And why maybe are you leaning towards picking or expecting to see those warbands? Let's do 3 each.
Okay, I'll take the lead. So one of the, and I'll just kind of go based on my own personal choices. So I'm planning on taking Gore Chosen. I think or rather, one of my potential choices is Gore Chosen. I haven't decided between that or if I'm just committing blind to whatever the new warband is and hating my life for it. But Gore Chosen's on the table because there is more health than normal there. And so being able to soak a couple hits and still keep on moving is something that I wanted to spec heavily into. Because with fighters having scything with as much ping and damage as there is, I felt that warbands with multiple bodies were going to struggle simply because they could outlast, because most everything was dictated by action economy, and you can only kill so many in a game. Not so in this environment. So that was why I leaned Gore Chosen. They have a really strong faction deck to work with, as well as the stats to back it up. They're pretty accurate on their own, and they have things to make them more accurate. Another one that I'm looking at, and I know I just talked about how bodies don't exactly mash up against the action economy like they used to. I'm considering Exiled Dead as maybe a threat, simply because they can control that action economy, but I'm wondering if they're just going to give up too much glory along the way. For my third pick, I think we're going to see Rippas. I think Rippas is going to come back. They're going to have that play that they had with their faction deck that they've had for a while now. I haven't seen for myself whether or not they blend well with the Nemesis decks.
I don't think Rip has ever left.
Right, I don't think they left,
Yeah.
but they weren't as prominent in Championship from what I saw.
For sure. And I think there's also just not as many people in our local area playing them, but I think that you're right. I think they're one of those warbands that has a strong in-faction set of cards that they can lean on to then try and find some other way to pair, and they like being aggro. So I mean it's like the things that most of these rivals decks are rewarding you for or what they want to be doing anyway. So it goes back to our synergy talk from some of the things that make a warband strong in this format right now. Brian, how about you?
Warbands that I expect to see. Gore Chosen. I didn't think that I would expect to see Headcrackers, but I think Skylar has some juicy details to bring up. And I mean, yeah, Hexbane. I think they're a really forgiving warband in that the amount, like anytime they're dealt a blow, they get something in return. So they're very forgiving in that sense, and they have a lot of threat. So it's also a warband that's awesome because it gives your opponent a lot of bad choices, and it can be really daunting to go up against that. Like really fun to go against, like because they're a puzzle.
Do you want to expand on that? How are they a puzzle?
So they have a lot of overlapping synergies. Amos can support a friendly fighter if he is within 2 hexes of the target. So I know in my matchup against Davey, he had a bit of a Hexbane castle going on. He had a bunch of defensive buffs on Hexbane, and not more than 2 or 3 times that Amos synergy with the support caused me a lot of consternation with his. So he provides an extra support in success on defense, and so I had to take out, per my objectives, Hexbane, but I really felt like afterwards I should have targeted Amos, taken him out, because of I made the wrong choice in taking out the puzzle. So,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
you also have if Hexbane gets a kill, then he inspires. So does Bridget. If one of their fighters goes down, he can remove a charge token off of one of his fighters. So you can have a fighter who's made a charge, and you're like, okay, I don't have to worry about them anymore. And then you take out Amos, and now Bridget's active again, and it's like, oh no, they're even deeper in my lines now after that first charge. It's a puzzle. Like, it's fun to play against in that sense. It's a challenge. They are glass cannons. They do go down, but every time they go down, they get a benefit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are not while they are forgiving, I think that they're a very high skill ceiling warband. So I think if you do see them, potentially that's something to watch out for, because it could mean that somebody's got a lot of reps with them and is like really comfortable with them, and they're going to be able to do a lot of like neat tricks, and just play to the field really well because they have lots of flexibility. They're certainly one that I would almost guarantee you'll see at least someone play them, and they'll probably play them very well.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Skylar?
Well, the ones I definitely wanted to highlight have all come up. I think we're going to see Rippas. I think we're going to see Hexbane, and I think we're going to see Gore Chosen. I think outside of Gnarl Spirit Pack, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see duplicates of those at the convention. So a few that I hope I see. I hope I see Storm of Celestis. I think they're really good right now.
Yep.
I would like to see Kagra's Ravagers as well. I think they got handed an incredible power spike with the new season. And touching on that a little bit, the charged out rule does a lot of work for them. And they have a really spicy upgrade, the Hellfire Sword, if I recall the name of it correctly. That's got a range 3 threat range. So once charged out, if you got that in your hand, you can pop that down on one of your fighters. All of a sudden, you're dealing, you're threatening 3 when you wouldn't expect that out of Kagra's. And a third one I'd really like to see is the Cunning Crew, simply because I think that they're always a technical pilot away from the top table.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely see that. I think they have, similar to Hexbanes, lots of tricks, lots of high skill ceiling plays. And they are good at being efficient in their aggro because of all their support tech. Did you want to expand at all on any of your other choices? You just sort of
Yeah. Sure, I can. So with Storm of Celestis, again, I think it's the charged out rule that's doing a lot of work here. If they run in with their range 1 attack and are charged, now you have to think about if you want to take one of their other fighters out and bring their count below 4, because they've got 4 actions, and that fighter still has a grenade round available to them. And as the rounds go on and you take down fighters, that continues to be something that they have available to them. And they're hitting, range 3, 2 damage, and pretty accurate at 2 hammers. And all 3 of them have that available to them. They also have some good hold cards available to them, so they might be one of the few war bands that can really lean into that in the current meta. Yeah, I think they'd be a surprise for whoever sits across from them, especially if they're not familiar with what they're capable of. And then the Cunning Crew, I think, is they always have really strong objectives. Like they have a surge or 2. I might just be thinking of Championship, where I always see 2 of them that does this, where like you just have to have a support off of a successful attack to score. And that's what they're going to be wanting to do. So they can gang up on you, make their attacks super accurate, and score big off of them.
Yeah, for sure. I certainly agree with all of your picks. I think those are probably a lot of the most likely things that we'll see. Other things that I think we might see, and I think that might be worth talking about, just as like if somebody were to not be playing aggro, what might we see? But I think before we get to that, so like the Exiled Dead, like just Josh mentioned, I think something to keep in mind. They're certainly still, they've just got such great action economy that they can do a lot of different things, and they just have enough bodies that they can be fairly aggressive. They're not going to charge towards you necessarily, but if you get towards them and you don't kill them, you're going to get swarmed, and that can be a problem. So something to watch out for there. I do think that, Canaan's Reapers could still have play. I think that Crimson Court could still have play. Like there's a lot of sort of these mid-range, not like hyper aggro, but still aggressive warbands that I think we could see a lot of. Any other things that you guys think might be some like offbeat choices that we might need to be thinking about? I've got a couple ideas, but I don't want to just keep rattling stuff off.
I think if anybody's going to pull off a hold build or an against the meta build, I think it's going to be Zarbags.
Yeah, gets okay.
Really?
I don't
So
see
what do you
that.
think?
Why?
I
don't see it as the like messiah savior of the meta. I'm just saying that in Nemesis, if anybody's going to hold and hold well, it's going to be Zarbags. They've got in-faction cards to support it. They have some of that tech that is to the effect of, I'm just going to hang out back here and you make me move.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have high hopes on seeing them hit the top table, but I think if anybody's going to try and go against the current and win, it'll be them.
Interesting.
I personally think they'll bleed too much glory.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I would love
any
to
of
be
the
proven
hold
wrong,
are going to.
but they're going to weep a lot of glory when Kira hits them.
Weep.
Well, yes, but so is Grimwatch, so is the Exiled Dead, so are every other hold warband. I just think that they're the ones that are going
Yeah, but
to.
Zarbags has 9 fighters.
Well, yes, if you table any of them, then yes, they're gonna lose. I'm saying if anybody's going to do hold, it's them.
So since you mentioned it, I will jump to this now. Grimwatch, they have the ability to revive fighters, and they have some really spicy in-faction hold surges. I haven't tried playing them yet, but I do think it's something to watch out for. If you can't kill them fast enough off of stuff in your territory, they might be able to just swarm into your territory and be a real problem. They have a really high glory ceiling, and they don't have to score through kills.
That's fair.
And
I think the. Go ahead.
I think it's important to remember all the warbands that can revive fighters, just because it's always such a surprise. To be like, oh yeah, the math is different in this matchup. There's an extra fighter or two that I have to deal with.
I agree, and I think the thing that Grimwatch are going to suffer for is there's a lot of be in enemy territory, and they don't want you in their territory. So
no, that is true, but I think in almost all the and this is probably something we should have talked about earlier. So we have these aggro matchups where both sides are going to want to be in enemy territory. Most likely, only one side will actually get to be in enemy territory because somebody will have sort of dictated where the fighting is going to happen.
Right.
How do you what are you guys thinking about that? What are you sort of planning for? What are your thoughts on how to sort of strategize around that?
So my thought is, particularly with Fearsome Fortress, I think and this will kind of depend on what the next deck is. I think Fearsome Fortress is the weakest of the bunch. In
Say
That was
what?
loud.
in that it's fairly easily worked around. Fairly easily. All you have to do is offset boards or longboard.
That's very true. Longboarding really hurts Fearsome Fortress. So if you are playing Fearsome Fortress and you know that's what you want to be doing, try to be not longboarded, I guess.
Right.
Well,
And that's the thing. Either you give them the longboard option or you're giving them more objectives.
well, I'll counter that later on, but yeah.
Oh no, we're talking about it. Go ahead.
No, we'll get into that when we're talking about the warbands we've built.
Oh,
Probably
okay.
just talk about it now because like it's something that's going on right now. So say you're playing Fearsome Fortress and you're getting longboarded. What is it that you're thinking is your counter to that?
You're just gonna have to move the objectives. The Fearsome Fortress does give you opportunities. They have a ploy card, Tanglebriar, in order to get that second hex onto the board, the second snare token.
Mm-hmm.
They also have, so that way, if your opponent isn't bringing it themselves, then you can make sure to bring it yourself with the Tanglebriar. You also have Bold Engineer, Mason's Great Hammer. So Bold Engineer gives a move bonus if you're not making a charge. As a reaction, after a friendly fighter's activation, pick one feature token in an empty hex adjacent to this fighter. Place that feature token in this fighter's hex. So you could equip Bold Engineer onto a fighter, move them into no man's land where, say, in a longboard situation, it is difficult to get more than 2 objectives in no man's land or 1 hex of no man's land.
Mm-hmm.
You could manage 2, but if your opponent really wants to thwart it, they can.
Right. But then you're spending tech on making your playstyle work instead of combating your opponent or actually really accomplishing anything.
Well, I would still counter that because Mason's Great Hammer has a reaction after this fighter's activation. Remove a feature token from this fighter's hex and place another available feature token in this fighter's hex. So you can kind of smith around with some of the hexes. You can delete a objective token and be able to put that into on the sideboard, and then summon in the objective token with either a plunder reaction, plunder being reaction after taking an enemy fighter out of action, place an available objective next to your fighter. So you can delete objectives that aren't in No Man's Land and then replace them with plunder. And Mason's Great Hammer does come with a pretty good attack action. 2 dice, hammers, cleave, Grievous 1 for 2 damage flat, spiking to 3 with Grievous.
So to jump in here as well, I think if you're going to run Fearsome Fortress, I think it's run best with a 3 or 4 fighter warband for exactly this reason. I think you should take a good look at your boards before you sit down for the tournament and be prepared if they have you present a board first, your opponent, have a board ready that you're okay with getting longboarded on either side of it, right? So just have your starting hexes already mapped out on a board or two in case this comes up, so that when it inevitably does, because your opponent's going to hear you say Fearsome Fortress, and this could very well be their immediate response. Just know how to play to it. And if you have a war band with 5 or more fighters, that becomes increasingly harder. And then to jump off of what Brian's talking about with like different card tech that's available in Fearsome Fortress, the Walking Wall will also help ensure scoring and capability with the deck, as well as that starting objective token, or not objective token, but the available snare cover token that you get to plant yourself at the beginning, as well as if you're getting longboarded, you got first choice on objective. So you're going to be able to guarantee one objective is where you want it to be, as well as then that extra placement from the Fearsome Fortress card itself.
Yeah, because if you're getting longboarded and you're placing the first objective, you don't really want to put that objective in the center. You want to put it, you want to dictate where your opponent can't then follow up and really clog up No Man's Land. So putting it towards one of the 1 hex away from No Man's Land, I'd probably in there so that you can dictate that it's closest or in the preferable spot. But that also depends on, especially if the board they chose to longboard you with, if it's got hexes around those edges, you got to be able to pick that decisively.
Absolutely. So I think that's all good points, and I think it just it's a reminder that there's more than just picking cards that we have to consider here. And so when you're trying to play the non-aggro strategies, you're having to consider a lot more things, just because you have to worry more about positioning theoretically than your opponents do. Somebody playing Gnarl Spirit Pack, maybe they're playing stuff that cares about being in enemy territory, but they're just going to want to get to you anyway, so they probably were going to go into enemy territory regardless. So all of these things are good things to keep in mind. But to that point, I think it is also good to remember where we have, lots of different strategies in the game, but the rivals decks, as we've been mentioning, are limiting you a little bit. And so when you're trying to play these other war bands that don't do the aggro thing, you suddenly start to be having to lean towards doing some stranger things or having to think harder. So I guess this is maybe a good time for me to mention the war bands that I'm bringing, but also, or thinking about bringing, but also thinking might be seen. So I think another one that you could see that we haven't mentioned yet is Morgoth's Crushes. There's some, as far as I can tell, some question as to whether or not you'd actually know how they're going to play, just because they have beta rules right now, and I don't see anything in the post about what the beta rules are going to be. But regardless, we might see crushes because they're just a good aggro warband, but they don't have to be like a full charge forward aggro warband. They have some hold stuff in their own cards, which could help them to be more of a counterpunch, which I think could
That's
help
true.
them. I think Wormspat can do a similar thing. They can also be a counterpunch. They can do a number of different things and be hard to remove. So it's like, okay, come to me. That's kind of what I want. And then get the counterpunch. And then the last one I think we might actually see that we haven't talked about yet is Lady Harrow's Mournflight. And I think you always have to remember that they're around, and they're always pretty good because their in-faction cards are quite strong, especially the fact that they have multiple different pushes so they can reposition enemy fighters. And they have a lot of passive scoring. So, well, they are definitely not as well positioned for Nemesis, in my opinion. I think you do have to remember that they are probably going to be one of these warbands that's doing something different than aggro, and might do it very well and be hard to deal with if you can't hit them, because they all start on 2 dodge. So those are my 3 picks for warbands you might see. In terms of a warband that I'm actually thinking about taking, though, I'm trying out Starblood Stalkers, mostly because I just want to play something that's already painted, but also because I don't want to be full aggro. And Starblood Stalkers can flex and have some interesting options for being able to get into enemy territory quickly. They can cover a lot of the board without being clumped up together, which negates some of that risk of having scything. And if you can get on both sides, at least something that I've seen so far, is if you can get on both sides of an aggro warband, you start to split them, and it makes it difficult for them to choose what they want to do, because they might not have enough speed to get all the way across the board if they had to go to like their back line and then to your back line. So those are all things I'm considering. But I think that maybe what we've shown here is that, well, the main strategy is probably going to be aggro, and it's going to be predominantly aggro. There are other options, but you're going to have to continue to plan a lot more and probably get a lot more practice games if you want to be able to try and play something that's not aggro. Any other thoughts about some of these other strategies, other things that might be sort of the dark horse picks that we could be seeing in the Nemesis format?
I want to ask, who thinks that we're going to see Mala? Because Malag's he's always been the tournament boogeyman, right? I'm not so sure for a Nemesis tournament.
I think that you'll almost certainly see him. I have no idea if he'll do well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that sentiment. I think the thing that Mollog has capitalized on is niche cards in Championship that most people don't do because they target
Can't.
your leader, or right, because you can't. But I don't think there's enough of that for him to capitalize on. Sure, he's chunky and he can abuse the action economy a little more than what most people can. I just don't see it being as viable when everybody wants to do all of the murder yesterday.
Well, I think Mollog always kind of comes back to the fore anytime there's a high prevalence in accuracy cards. And there certainly is that. I think where he's really going to struggle and whether or not somebody can make it work is because a lot of the cards come with the caveat that it can't be placed on a large fighter. So I haven't personally looked at and judged the rivals decks based on that and whether or not that is critical to building a deck. So I don't know if there is a rivals deck that shouts out to Mollog, because I would think Tooth and Claw, but I know it particularly has a lot of cards with that caveat.
And now that I'm thinking on it, I think Mollog might have some play. It just might not come in the form that we're used to. Because Stalag Squig sitting on an objective either in the mid ground or in your own territory if you're the Mollog player can be a disruption. I don't think the Bat Squig and Spite Shroom are going to have much to say on the matter, but between the two, it might be disruptive. Winning, I don't know, but disruptive for sure.
Yeah. The only card that I've even thought about when thinking about the big fighters and specifically Mollog is that there's a surge in Tooth and Claw where you score it after your leader gets their second or subsequent kill, and it's for 2 glory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mollog will pick that
It's-
up, guaranteed.
That's pretty good.
But I think you can't build around one card, so I don't know. He also has a really terrible in-faction objective deck, so I think it does make it very difficult for him. But you might be able to just play
Gotcha.
almost exclusively with Tooth and Claw and be fine, just because he's like, I'm gonna go smash things, and if you happen to roll well, you're gonna smash things. That's just how
Yeah.
Mollog works out, and his
Well,
in-faction upgrades are good.
on that note, even the kill 2, he's going to struggle a lot against 3-man bands because all of them have 4 or more health. So unless
Sure.
he gets an attack action upgrade, that's 4 attacks that have to succeed for a surge.
Yeah.
4?
Well,
Because he starts out at damage 3. Most of your 3-man bands have at least 4 health.
Yeah.
So at least at the beginning, if you get that turn 1, that's 4 actions that you have to take in order for that surge to go off.
I mean, yes, sure. I don't know that it has to be. There's pings, there's damage upgrades, there's other options, but I don't think we need to
True.
necessarily break it all down on the fly here. But I think
the rivals decks are pretty sparse for +1 damage, like just as a great strength equivalent.
yeah, but he has one because he's from one of those old
does he?
bands that just gets one. I think he's worth considering. I think it's a fair question. I think he's something that you could see. I think in the same vein, like that's sort of why I started thinking about Hrothgorn, because he's in the same vein but has more flexibility. But again, his in-faction objective deck is pretty rough. For similar reasons, actually. They both want to just like kill everything, and that's not guaranteed to happen for your end phase, and you can clog your hand really badly. So something that is very difficult to work around.
But Hrothgorn does have the benefit of, when inspired, having 2 block.
He does.
It's pretty formidable.
Slight defense boost. Absolutely.
Especially for a big fighter.
Well, we have certainly talked a lot about the different possible things we'll see. So we're breaking down, I guess, in a way, what we think the Nemesis meta might look like, in a long roundabout way. Are there any other specific call-outs for sort of cards to watch out for, or specific like strategies that you've seen people play already in the Nemesis format where you're like, ooh, that was something that's probably going to be like a really nice high level play that you might want to be prepared for in specific decks and specific combinations?
Maybe cards not to choose, Skylar?
Sure.
Guess, yeah, and I guess maybe even before that, one that I have gotten caught out with multiple times already is Call to Heal. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And so if you see somebody doing something where you're like, man, the positioning on that seems very suspect, there is a push 4 that you could be seeing come right after that weird positioning. Something to keep in mind. And if you're not considering playing that card yourself, and you're using Tooth and Claw, is definitely one that you probably want. And I guess for people who aren't familiar, the card is essentially it's if you have a Savage Fighter, you can then push them up to 4 hexes as long as they end adjacent to a friendly fighter. Or do they
I believe it also has the benefit of you could push an enemy fighter 1 hex.
You could. Yeah. And so you get that option. It's flexibility. is really nice, but then that repositioning is, I think, what always catches me out.
And that's in a tooth and claw deck, so if your
It
opponent
is.
has that, keep an eye out. They could lash out with somebody and then yoink them right back. So you might think, okay, well, at least I get to swing on them now. And then they just take them right back.
Speaking of push 4 options, this is not where Josh was leading me. But if you're running Fearsome Fortress, there is redeploy in that deck. And if that gets comboed with Walking Wall, at least the way it's written today, without any sort of FAQ to call out otherwise, Walking Wall enables a push 4 from wherever that fighter is to wherever that fighter wants to be, as long as they started in their territory. So there's another push forward to watch out for.
Could you break down both cards so that
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
understand why?
So Walking Wall is for the purpose of cards with the Fearsome Fortress symbol. While this fighter is not on a feature token, this fighter is considered to be on a feature token, and this fighter's hex is considered to contain a feature token that cannot be flipped. And then redeploy says choose one friendly fighter on a feature token in your territory. Push that fighter up to 4 hexes. At the end of that push, that fighter must be on a feature token. So they've got to start and end on a feature token. They also have to start on the in your territory. So that feature token they're starting on, your territory, that could be Walking Wall, and then Walking Wall could also count for the landing zone as well because of the way it's written. We've previously seen a similar combo in it was Darkening Stone and Cover of Darkness. However, Cover of Darkness called out moving into a hex, into another cover hex, and so it was ruled that you're not moving into a cover hex. You're kind of creating one underneath you as you enter. So you couldn't use it to just push anywhere with Cover into Darkness. But here it checks at the end of that push, that fighter must be on a feature token, which you definitely will be. So that could launch, if you're against somebody with Fearsome Fortress, they could launch with redeploy off of any objective token that they're or feature token that they're on,
In their territory.
in their territory, or just off of Walking Wall. So push 4s are serious business to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, major redeploy options. But it is from the enemy territory, and so then they can go wherever, but they can't yoink somebody back from no man's land or your territory.
Right. Yeah, it's not an escape card unless the escape is leaving your land that has now been invaded.
Right.
Goodbye, land. It's now yours.
That's true. My call out for a really nasty card is in the Daring Delver's deck, Quick Roots. So this is a ploy trap card, and this has done me dirty several times. Reaction: play this after an enemy fighter's activation. If that fighter has one or more move and or charge tokens, deal 1 damage to that fighter. So I have made the mistake of making an action with a vulnerable fighter. So like I've actually tried to make a charge, and this person I'm actually looking at it again. I don't think it can do what they're doing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in my sequence, I had a vulnerable fighter make a charge action. After they made the move portion of their charge, I had this card played, and it would take them out of action.
That's not right. The wording on the card says after the fighter's activation, so they would have to fully complete the activation, which would be after the charge sequence was completely completed.
Well, I got done real dirty multiple times then.
Yeah.
But however, this could still catch you off guard if you make a charge onto a feature token or something that you wanted to hold on to, and now that person's just going to die. So you might have tried to get that person, you might have called to heal or redeploy, get them back to safety to get them away, but after they have a move or a charge token on them, suddenly they're dead.
Yeah, I think some of the plays that I've worked with this because I'm using it in my the Starblood Stalkers because I'm doing all the nasty ping things because I'm doing the Daring Delvers, but it's any activation. So if somebody has a range attack and they make an attack and they already moved, well, you can get them then. They didn't have to make the move that turn. They just have to have the token already. They could go on guard, just be like, I'm vulnerable. I don't want to get attacked. Then you can get them.
Well, it does have to be that fighter.
Yeah.
Play this after an enemy fighter's activation if that fighter has one or more move or charge tokens.
Right. But what I'm saying is that you can get them after they already have the token,
Yeah.
even if the action was not a move or a charge.
Yeah.
And that includes if you gave them the token. So you could even set it up where like, oh, my fighter now has this move token. Well, I guess I'll
auto bottle.
It's pretty rude. It's a very mean card.
Oof.
That reaction is very hard to play around, and it's not very nice.
I would say if you're up against Daring Delvers and you haven't seen Quick Roots yet, expect it.
Yes.
Well, I feel better about how that reaction works now, but I would like to put out the PSA: don't let your opponent do what my opponent did to me.
Yeah, make sure they let you finish your activation.
Yeah.
Brian, did you just say read the card?
No, I did not.
Or TFC, my dude.
Twice.
I do have another one that I ran into in our last session of test games, but Josh, anything that you've seen that you want people to be aware of in the Nemesis format?
Oh, not that I haven't heard touched on yet today.
So the one card that I saw come up recently in our test games is that, so I'm playing with Daring Delvers and doing the ping stuff. So I'm playing Sudden Demise, and for folks who don't know, and you should probably be aware of this card just in general. Sudden Demise is a surge where you can score this immediately after an enemy fighter is taken out of action by either a lethal hex or a gambit. So basically you pinged somebody to death or push them into a lethal to kill them, and you'll score this as 2 glory on the surge, so it makes the kill worth 3, which is pretty crazy by itself. So yes, be aware of this card. It is very good. People with pings will play it against you. But the weird thing is that having to play a lot more less efficient pings led me to playing the card Grasping Rootgrave. So this is a domain ploy, and it says you can't play this in the final power step of a round. So essentially there must be one more activation left in the round when you play this. That is the last opportunity to do so. At the end of the action phase, you will then deal 1 damage to each fighter adjacent to a feature token. And this also, I guess, is a reason to be a little wary of playing Fearsome Fortress, because you can ping a lot of fighters with this if they're doing the clumped feature tokens in the middle. But so the interesting thing that I found is that because of where this triggers, there's an odd interaction with how surges score. So surges specifically are called out that they score whenever you meet the condition, but you don't actually get the card cycled and scored until you are in a surge step. So normally you have surge steps at the beginning of the activation, after the activation, and then in the power step. Because this triggers after the action phase, there isn't another surge step until the start of the next round's activation, because that's the first surge step that comes up. So if you have Sudden Demise in hand and you are trying to score it in round 3, you can't score it with Grasping Rootgrave, even if you meet the condition, because Grasping Rootgrave will trigger after the last surge step. So a very weird interaction, something I had to look at the rulebook a couple different times to try and make sure I knew all the timing to get that right. So just a weird timing. It only is that one card because nothing else deals damage at the end of the actions phase like that. But I'm sure that more than a few people will probably be using Grasping Rootgrave in their Daring Delvers decks because they need those extra ploys or pings. Excuse me. So don't let them cheat. Okay, yeah. So that was the last one I had to call out. I think I know Skylar at least has a card that he wants to mention as one to probably expect that either you shouldn't play it, or if you see someone play it, you'll probably have to know how it works to make sure that they don't try to use it in a way that
Yes,
doesn't
I
work.
do. All right. I do not have the card up in front of me. I am bringing it up just so that I can read it verbatim. I think I would have had this card up.
You know, they don't call us prepared professionals.
I have my notes on the card, not the card. All right. So the card Phil is alluding to is Final Say. And this is also what Josh was trying to lead me to earlier. So Final Say reads, it's an upgrade. Reaction. After a gambit is played that chooses, keyword chooses, one or more friendly fighters, give this fighter one charge token and break this card. When you do, that gambit is not resolved. So, when I first read this card, I was excited. I tossed it straight into my first Wild Hunt and Daring Delvers deck and gave it a go. So it was in my initial draft, and after actually only one game with it, I realized it was more easily maneuvered than I would have liked, especially in Nemesis. So against Tooth and Claw, Dark Command can still deal damage to you if your opponent positions and chooses their own fighter. So Dark Command is another ping option available to you. Let me pull that one up. Dark Command is choose one beast or savage fighter. So not friendly, not enemy, fighter. Deal one damage to one enemy fighter adjacent to the chosen fighter. So when you're up against a Tooth and Claw deck, be mindful of who on your side is savage and that they're not seated right next to somebody that would be a good ping target for your opponent. So what Final Say does here is it would indeed prevent them from selecting your fighter, but they don't have to. They can select one of their savage fighters, so they can charge somebody into position or get a beast into position and deal one damage to you and completely ignore your Final Say. So that's a bummer. Dark Command would definitely be one of those cards you'd want to be able to block out here. Call to Heal. We brought this one up before. Similar case. It could be used to push you distraction style, but if you have Final Say out, then they could just choose to use it as friendly push. So far we have two cards that you would want Final Say to block out that they can play around. And the only other card in Tooth and Claw that has choose is Binding Hex, and it's not a common pick. And then against Daring Delvers, it can't stop Quick Roots, and it can't stop Grasping Rootgrave. Both pings that you would hope you'd be able to stop with a card like this, but neither of them say choose. It can, however, stop Flame Wisps. That is the deck's only choose gambit. But killing the enemy wizard will also drastically reduce the effectiveness of this card. So if you can just take out their enemy wizard when you know that they're playing Daring Delvers, then you've already dealt with that problem. So going on a little bit further, there's Fearsome Fortress. There's only one choose enemy card in this deck, Makeshift Bombardment. This card says choose one friendly fighter on a feature token and choose one enemy fighter visible to that friendly fighter and within 3 hexes of that friendly fighter. Pick one. Stagger the chosen enemy fighter or push the chosen enemy fighter 1 hex away from the chosen friendly fighter. So this card actually does get blocked by Final Say. And it has distraction capabilities, so this is a nice one to block out. But that depends on if you can draw, equip, and keep alive your Final Say fighter before Makeshift Bombardment is used. Lastly, against Deadly Depths, the only choose in that deck is Blazing Light. And there's nothing that you need to worry about blocking Blazing Light. So in Nemesis, Final Say is incredibly matchup dependent because it is best served to handle warband specific choose enemy cards, since current supplementary decks, like the ones I just broke down, are not bringing many of their own. So I did the math, so you don't have to. The research, I went into each of these 4 decks to see what choose cards you could block out. And unfortunately, the answer was only a few. And I don't think it's worth your card slot. But if you want to bring it and you get lucky and get paired against a, let's say, Lady Harrows with multiple distractions, you might be happy you had it.
Yeah, I think the ultimate message there is certainly it's not as efficient as you'd hope, and you can probably find more efficient options to fill out your upgrade slots.
I think so, sadly.
Yeah, and I think efficiency is certainly the name of the game here, because there's so many suboptimal choices that you're going to be forced into that you want to have as many really, really solid choices as you can, so that when you do have to take those suboptimal choices, they're not compounding a further problem with your deck.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts about some of these cards to be aware of, cards that we've found to be good or problematic in our testing so far?
No, I think we hit some of the big highlights for things to be on the lookout for.
Yeah,
I think so
think
too.
so.
Yeah. So we ran down some of the considerations for the Nemesis format as a whole, some of the warbands we think we're going to see, what are some of the what are the popular strategies, what are some of the unexpected but potential strategies you might see, and then some of the options that we're considering. I think that pretty much runs everything down. Anything else that any of you guys would like to mention before we close things up here?
Yeah. So the only one of us 4 so far to break down what they're personally considering bringing was actually Phil. And I'd like
Oh,
to.
really? I thought everybody sort of mentioned, because Josh, you said Gore Chosen.
Yep.
Oh,
Gore
oh,
chosen or blind picking the new warband.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't exactly hear what Brian was thinking, but he was thinking Fearsome Fortress.
I'm also holding out hope for that the new warband is something spectacular. I don't think there's been this the preview that we have of the symbol for them has a lot of intrigue, a lot of chatter online. So I'm holding out hope that it's what my bet is of like dark elves, like what's his name, Malarion, not Marathi's warband, but Marathi's son. So I'm really holding out hope for that, and keeping my options open. But as far as what I'm currently working on, like I said, I've kind of abandoned Loon Court. I didn't really have the zeal to get them painted, and wasn't really enjoying some of the practice games I was having. So I went back to my old bread and butter of Dread Pageant. Since Fearsome Fortress came out, I thought that they had a lot more play. I haven't been seeing the sheer amount of pings that I thought I might be seeing. The only one that has really made me been the realization of all the pings that I feared was Skylar's Pingifiers. So I'm gonna give it a go for a little bit here, kind of bide my time. But Dread Pageant is one that I also kind of want to just see continue to pop up in the meta, see what I could do with them, see if I can continue to keep their name in the conversation. So I was fancying around a Fearsome Fortress deck for them.
Hey Josh, who are you thinking? I'm sorry. Did you say you were pairing Fearsome Fortress with
Gore Chosen.
Gore Chosen?
You did.
I said I was playing Gore chosen. I didn't say I was pairing them with Fearsome Fortress.
See, I didn't think I caught a pairing from you. What are you contemplating over there?
I haven't landed on which one that I'm like for sure going to Adepticon with, but there's a lot of ping, and it'd be a real shame if somebody came in with a bunch of ping at their disposal.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could also go the domain route, I think, a little bit with Daring Delvers. I think they've got good domain tech there. If I recall correctly, that was one of our locals, Taylor, running a Nemesis domain build with Daring Delvers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if it was Championship or Nemesis, but it was really good. And yeah, no, thinking back, definitely Nemesis. So dabbling into doubling down on domains with Gore Chosen is a fun option for anybody out there.
Well, how about you, Skylar? Since you wanted to make sure everyone got to call out their warband choice.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
I mentioned at the top of the call, or the top of the episode, that I was messing around with head crackers and skates. So I just kind of wanted to uh, shed some little light on what pairings I thought were fun with them and why I was leaning into them. Um, so with skates, Daring Delvers. And I'm leaning into that and the exploration mechanic there because I think their speed allows them to be nimble enough to get where I need them to be and keep them safe for the most part, albeit the one that I will not state again. But outside of that, looking over at Headcrackers, Fearsome Fortress is what I'm looking at pairing with them. And I got really excited when I saw Fearsome Fortress was bringing back the ability to place a future token at the start of the game because of the ability that Daco and Wallop have to push one towards the enemy leader at the beginning of the game. So it's harder to get exactly onto future tokens with both of them right at the beginning of the gate without having access to that additional placement because your opponent can mess with your ability to place your objectives where you want. But with that extra token, you can pretty much secure that both of them can end up on a future token at the beginning. And then paired with that comes two surges that I'm pretty excited that they have access to with Bold Sortie. Score this immediately after an activation step in which a friendly fighter's charge action began on a future token in your territory, as well as Earthworks. A friendly fighter is given a guard token if that fighter is on a future token within 1 hex of no one's territory. So both of those end up being a surge that the Mad Mob can score turn 1 with Daco and Wallop's ability, as well as that extra token that you're able to place at the start.
Yeah, definitely was fun to see playing into it, playing against it. It makes for some interesting options. Certainly makes you have to think more about what headcrackers are doing than what you might normally expect, and maybe something that is worth calling out just because it's not as common to see anymore. Well, basically, it's impossible to see anymore outside of this matchup. Is that primacy is something that they bring along.
Mhm.
And that extra glory, it matters, especially in Nemesis, where the glory totals tend to be slightly lower. Having a potential 3 extra glory that you could score in a round or in a game, it adds up. It adds up real quick. So, I
Not
like.
to be underestimated.
Yeah, I like the head crack as sort of as a dark horse that could be stronger than people maybe expect.
Agree.
I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty good discussion of sort of going into this tournament being Nemesis and how at least we're thinking about it, and hopefully that gives some folks some good ideas of like what to think about, what they might try and do for building their own decks, and sort of how to strategize some of what they're doing with building. I think it's something that I didn't or I neglected to mention at the beginning of the episode. If you are thinking about wanting to play Nemesis and you haven't really ever built decks before, and you're just new to the game, but you want to go play because it's a lower barrier to entry than Championship, and I think there might be at least a handful of people like that, given the pretty easy access to the format that is Nemesis. If you go on over to our friends Battle Mallet podcast's website, they actually have some lists that they've already built for every single faction in the entire game. Basically, when Nemesis was a thing, like their main focus was Rivals Plus and Rivals. So when Nemesis was officially announced, they went through all the different warbands and built Nemesis decks for all of them. I don't know if they've revised any of those yet with new decks, but I'm sure they're probably working on it because that is their bread and butter.
Yeah, no, they've got it complete, and I'll make sure to get the link for us to add in the show notes.
Yeah. So if anybody is interested in like just being able to say, hey, I don't really know what to do, but I want to play this warband I just bought, I just need a deck to use, there's fully built decks that you can just go grab right off their website. And that's probably a really great way to just quickly have something that's playable. And you know that somebody who is familiar with the game has already sort of vetted that this build is at least functional. Like maybe they haven't like fine-tuned it to like high competition level, but they know it works, right? So something cool that's out there, something good to be able to reference. Any final thoughts before I close us out here?
Not off the top of my head.
We'll be rolling out to Adepticon in force. Hope to see you there.
Yeah. It should be a good time. I don't know that I plan on playing in both tournaments, but it is worth noting that there's also a friendly tournament on the Wednesday night of Adepticon, the 22nd of March. It's the first day of the event. It's just a friendly Nemesis tournament. So if you want to get an additional tournament in before you do the 2-day Grand Clash, you certainly can do that. I don't know that I'm planning to play in both, but something to be aware of.
Yeah, I know that 2 of our locals are currently signed up for it. Skylar's on the wait list. Skylar, were you able to reach out and hear from them whether or not that it's a hard cap at 20?
Not yet, but as of Adepticon registration, how it currently stands, it is 20 seats only and is full, but I am looking to reach out to the Dice Heroes. They are the folks hosting it to see if that number is indeed locked in or if we can expand it.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see. I currently am planning to be at the GW preview, but if it's an open thing and we can, I might pivot, but currently planning to go to the preview at the same time.
Yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind. It is concurrent with the preview from GW, so you'll have to choose what you want to do and see if there's even a spot. All right, that I think will do it for today. We'll definitely keep folks posted. We've got about a month until, or 2 months until the tournament, so we'll probably have a few updates about our warbands as we go. But for now, I think that's a good primer, and folks can get started with their thoughts. If you have thoughts about anything that we said about Nemesis as a format, or things about breaking down for Adepticon, or warbands you're thinking about that we didn't think about, please reach out to us. Let us know. You can reach us at WTHcast on Twitter, or you can get us at whatthehexcast@gmail.com. Feel free to go and check out any of our other content or any of the other Mortal Realms content over at themortalrealms.com. Specifically, I will call out that we have a couple of old episodes from about a year ago and 2 years ago for our previous journeys to Adepticon and some of the things that we're doing to sort of prepare for a major tournament like this. I think some of those concepts still apply today, even though the format is different. So if you want to hear some more about tournament prep, go find those old episodes. We could probably link to those ones if we decide that is important. Coming up next, we will likely be recapping our tournament that was going to be coming up here on the 21st. So boys, you up for a flavor-text quiz?
You know I am.
Hit me.
All right. So I found one that I thought went fair. The name of the card, I think, goes fairly well with what we're talking about today. That'll be your clue. The flavor text is "This is my kill, long cut" by Goral Spinehammer.
Oh my. You're killing me, because I've almost ignored this warband out of spite.
Are we immediately assuming it's warband specific?
I mean, that's fair.
I mean, it's got to be a
Fierce
surge.
competition.
It has to be a surge, huh?
Yeah.
It
Fierce
doesn't-
competition.
Fierce competition. That's your guess. Brian's guess is fierce competition. All right. What about you, Josh? You got a guess?
I don't.
Okay.
And
Skylar?
is it an aggro card?
It's fairly aggro.
I don't. I was thinking about raw materials, but that's got corn on it.
Well, the prize goes to Brian. The card is indeed fierce competition. Good on you, Brian. Good job.
I was scrolling
with
through the
that
card
one.
names and I was like, that seems good.
Golf clap.
Ooh, looking at the card names.
I know. Huh.
Yeah,
All right.
I've seen it before.
Yeah. And then to close us out, our recommended listening for today is going to be Nemesis by Benjamin Clementine. I'm not actually sure how you say his name. I've only seen it spelled. Pretty interesting song. Go check it out. Pretty fun. For What the Hex, I've been Phil.
I've been Brian.
I've been Josh.
And I've been Skylar.
Let's try that.
Shout out to Davey.
Yeah, Davey, you the MVP. Thank you.
I didn't trip first this time. Hey, this sounds like a perfect moment for editing.